Okay. And what do you think is happening in Iran then?
Well, I told you in the last video, but I don't know if you wanted to hear it, but I think it's to do with Stargates, but
Okay,
that's
okay. I've forgotten that. All right, what are
well, no,
Stargates?
there's a thing called Stargate 10 in Iran, which contains immortality codes, which has been blocked off for a very long time by the fourth dimensional entities I've mentioned before, which is like the Draco and the Archons, and that stuff sounds like science fiction. But as time goes by, it will become less science fiction because it's just starting to. I mean, there was an article, I think, since I last spoke to you, there was an article in the New York Post saying, "Is Donald Trump a time traveler?" last week, right? Now, why would the New York Post be giving airtime to a crazy conspiracy theory like that? Because they're introducing these ideas through mainstream media gently, saying, yeah, tinfoil hat and everything, but at the same time, it's still there. It's a bit like, the expression, you don't think of a pink elephant. You, a pink elephant comes straight to mind. It doesn't matter how they present it, it's
Mm,
there. And that's on purpose because I think this stuff is going to come out, is coming out.
okay. Okay. Now I noticed during I was able to see this during lockdown, what the British government were doing. They would like put out a trial balloon, or
Mm.
they'd put something into the conversation in discourse, and it would slowly grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. So for the New York Post to do that, and then what was it the UK government bought the domain aliens.gov the other day?
No, I think it was the US government.
Sorry, the US government. Yes.
Yeah.
They bought aliens.gov.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You
Okay.
see, that's how it's coming out. You see, they're doing it. And so, to my mind, the whole world's been under MK Ultra for a long time. I mean, if people don't know what that means, it's mind control, basically. I mean, if you go and watch Stranger Things, which is based on the Montauk Project, the original script for Stranger Things was called the Montauk Project.
The Montauk Project.
The Montauk Project.
Montauk.
Three,
Okay.
yeah, which is all related to the Philadelphia experiment, which was the time travel experiment. You and I, mate, have watched that film in the 70s. I don't know if you're old enough, but there was a film about it. It was like a US Navy experiment, time travel experiment, where the sailors got caught in, they got merged into the walls of the ship. It was a terrible mess. But that was a time travel experiment in the 1940s. So, this stuff isn't as crazy as it sounds, and and more people are starting to talk about it. And the Montauk Project was a massive, well, if you've watched Stranger Things, that's basically a documentary. It's not really a TV series. The original script for that was called the Montauk Project, but they said we're going to have to change the name because we want to hide it. But there's a really interesting character called Stuart Swerdlow, who's the great great grandson of the first president of the USSR, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, guys, but along those lines. He was part of the Montauk Project because he was identified because of his bloodline and his psychic abilities. And he says, he's one of the survivors of that. He said 300,000 children died in those experiments that happened in the Montauk Project, which is on an island in New York. And that involved time travel, interdimensional travel, summoning fourth dimensional entities, etc., etc., etc. And, that stuff is all true. And I think that's the stuff that's going to come to the surface in the middle of all this crazy war scenario.
Okay. Let me just go. I don't know whether you're saying Montour or Monsor or
Montauk,
Monzor. How do you spell it?
Montauk, Montauk.
Montauk. Mantauк. And people can find stuff on that on
Oh
YouTube
yeah,
and
yeah. Go and
Google.
don't believe me. Go and research it if you're watching this and never heard of it.
Okay. All right. Well, I did say that at the beginning we were going to talk about some weirdness.
Well, look, if you're not a conspiracy theorist by now, I mean,
Conspiracy profit, Mark, please.
no, it's just I just had my own path to this sort of information, and I've spent probably 100,000 hours researching this stuff. I can't necessarily point to a book and give you a page number and a reference, but I've just been researching this for so long that a lot of this information is just like second
Mm.
nature. I just had a conversation with my 15-year-old son in the kitchen before I came on, And he was talking to me about what was going on, and he said it's so weird that I know all this stuff. I said, well, that's because you're my son. You grew up with it. Now, if people haven't grown up with this stuff and they haven't been exposed to this information or they haven't done the work or the research, then of course it sounds nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And I don't mean to disrespect it in any way or diminish it or there's stuff I don't know, but one of the things that I've learned over the years is to at the very least be open to all these new ideas because we've been lied to about so much stuff.
That's
So
the
much
that's the
stuff.
point. That's the point. This audience now knows that we've been lied to our whole lives about everything. They know that by now. You know, COVID was 6 years ago. If you haven't worked that out by now, then you've got a major problem. Um, the question is, where do we go with it? And also, I don't present myself as an oracle that knows everything. That's not the case. I'm just inquisitive
Mm,
and keep my mind flexible about this stuff. And the only reason I can say things like the Montauk project's a real thing is just because I've done thousands of hours of research to get to that opinion. But it is just my opinion, you know. And I'm
yeah.
not here to tell you this is a fact, Rich. It's you know, it's like I don't know if I said this last time I saw you, but whenever I drop my kids off at school, and I did homeschool them for 3.5 years, but the rest of the time, whenever I drop them off, 5 kids, I always say the same thing to them: have a nice day in prison. Remember everything they're teaching you is bullshit, and question everything, including this. And I think I grew up with common sense battered into me, and I grew up with an open mind, and I grew up with the possibility you can do anything, thanks to my parents. And you know, I just carry that forward. And I think my message to everybody is that we've all got to be like that. We've got to just get back to critical thinking, where you just actually do the research before you have an opinion.
Mm. Or you can keep I don't know if it's possible to have no opinion because one of the things people talk about is like, oh, this is an objective analysis. And no, there is, I don't think there's any such thing as an objective analysis. There's because I look at things, the way I look at things is shaped by the fact that I'm a man brought up in Britain, I'm Pakistani, I'm Muslim, I'm married, I'm middle class. That gives me a certain perspective, a certain view on life. And for you, it'd be different, in because of your heritage and your influences and your education. So for all of us, it's like, well, which one's objective? Well, no, there's my point of view and then your point of view and then somebody else's point of view. But being willing to put my point of view to one side and be willing to entertain new, novel, perhaps challenging ideas.
Hmm.
Okay, let me consider this. Let me try this out. It's so important. Um,
You're a rare creature, you know. Imagine going on to question time and discussing this stuff. They just wouldn't let you through the door, you know. And last time, do you remember the famous professor? I can't remember his name. He had a big black moustache. He was all over TV for 30 years, and then they just cut him when he came on. I think it was question time. He came on and he told the truth about, I can't remember what it was. It was either vaccines or climate change or something. Like David Bellamy told the
yeah.
truth about climate change, and they just cut him. And then the eugenicist David Attenborough continued to rise. And in my mind, David Attenborough's died 3 times in the last 10 years. And I remember his death being announced, and yet there he is still alive. So we're going through some really interesting situations where, you know, some of us are aware of these things happening, but it doesn't make sense to somebody if they've never heard these ideas before. But I'd say to anybody watching this, if I say anything that sounds crazy, instead of saying, "Oh, you're crazy, I'm out of here, Rich, thanks a lot," go and research it. You know, it's all out there.
And but go and research ideas that challenge you. I was saying to you before we started recording that how one of the things I have to do as a social worker is I have to look upon a particular situation dispassionately. So what I do is I collect evidence,
Hmm.
evidence for the good and evidence for the bad, and then I weigh it up. So, for example, with regards to the idea of is Trump a pedophile or not, right? I collect evidence that he is. What is there that says that he is? And what is there that says that he isn't? Versus just collecting evidence for whatever my particular bias might be.
Hmm.
So then, on my channel, so with regards to what's going on in Iran, I have people on my channel who think that what Trump is doing is a good thing and that he's out to destroy the city of London, as well as I have people on my channel who think, no, 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 he's just doing this to because he's a Zionist and he just wants to support the Greater Israel Project. And then I also have you who's some bloody Stargates.
Well, not just stargates, but demonic entities. I think that's why he said that very controversial thing the other week about dropping bombs is fun on the boats, right? And that pissed off loads of people. But if you knew what he knew, then I think a lot of the things that he says are markers that we will be shown in the future to look back on and go, do you see? Do you see how you fell for that? Do you see what that meant now? It's all these double meanings. It's really interesting. I mean, but talking about what to follow on what the way that you said that you analyze stuff, it's like this meningitis thing that's going on in Kent at the moment,
Mhm.
right? So it looks very much now. I started reading this yesterday, and I was looking at it and going, well, hang on a minute. Firstly, you can't catch meningitis. Secondly, I had meningitis as a child, and I know intuitively that's the important thing here. I know that it was given to me. So then I had to think about, well, how was it given to me? How can I prove that? Because people are going to say, well, how do you know it was given to you, Mark? Because you probably just caught it off somebody. Excuse me. So I did just a bit of research, just a tiny bit of research, 10 minutes this morning. And I was like, when was the first meningitis jab first created? And then firstly, it came up with all the stuff in 2013 about this one that's being used at the moment. Secondly, I digged a little bit further. I dug a bit further. Digged? You can't dig, can you? I dug further and I found that there was actually a meningitis jab created in 1969, the year that I was born. And then there was the reason I got that jab, or a jab that contained meningitis. And I know I've still got meningitis in me because I've had a bioresonance scan, and meningitis is still a dormant thing within my system. And it nearly killed me. My parents were told I had like a 3% chance of living, and I remember the lumbar punch, and I had an out of body experience that was very amazing that I remembered 25 years later. But I read about this. There was an outbreak in 1974, 75 of whooping cough, I think, and then it was a medical emergency, and that's when it triggered the memory for me. And a lot of people watching this may understand this or relate to it. That sometimes you have to hear something that triggers an actual memory that happened to you. And in this case, I remember being forced to go into this room where this nurse was there in a white outfit, and then I got hit with that jab, and then a few weeks later, I was in hospital nearly dying. And as I remembered that, I remembered the fact that my brother was born with malformed eyes and my mother had a version of this as a kid, saying that she had rubella, but actually she had a rubella jab while she was pregnant, which is what formed my brother's blindness.
Wow.
So, so for me, it's a mixture of intuition, then doing a bit of research, and then piecing, two and two makes four within reasonable doubt. Because once you understand that, they've been at this for a very, very, very long time. In fact, I've got a page in one of my books here from 1898. I think this was 1897 in a German magazine.
Mhm.
Right? You've probably seen this before. Did I show you this before? I can't
No,
remember.
no, you haven't seen this before, but I've seen stuff about how when like the first smallpox vaccine was brought out, there was a lot of opposition. People were saying this is dangerous.
And there's loads of books that were written in the 1890s, 1910s, 1920s, warning people against this terrible idea of vaccinations, right? Sorry, I don't want your channel to, I should be careful, but, that understanding that first,
Sorry, just going to say, we all need to bear in mind that vaccines, especially the COVID vaccine, are safe and effective. I have
yes,
boosters every hour. In fact,
yeah,
as soon as this program is over, I'm going to have two boosters to catch up on what I may have missed.
I had four today.
Only
Bubble.
four.
Uh, No, all that, research then leads you to understand about the 1910 Flexner report, which was sponsored by the Rockefellers. That report got rid of amazing. I'm looking around for my Tesla machine. I've got a Tesla machine here. We have a Tesla machine in the healing center. It's incredible. It's called the Violet Ray machine. It creates high voltage electricity, goes into a sealed glass container which contains argon gas, and then when you put it on any part of the body, it floods it with ozone and it heals everything. And there were millions of these machines all over the world, but the Flexner report got rid of that. This machine, this machine here, I found this in an antique shop, and I looked at it and I said to the guy in the antique shop, "Do you know what that is?" And he said, "I think it's a part of a radio." And I said, "No, it isn't. That's a blood cleansing device, and it has these things that you hold here in your hand, and then this magnet here, you turn this around and it creates a small electrical current." Now there was a guy called Bob Beck about 30 years ago. This is 1860, right? This is an old machine. And Bob Beck rediscovered this idea and he called it immortal blood because when you put a small electrical current through the blood, it kills the parasites. And that is the problem. We are fighting against a parasitical class of people, but they're not people because they are inhabited by parasites, as we all are, because the parasites are the things that cause pretty much all disease and illness. So, when you start piecing it all together, you go, oh, okay, this all makes sense. Why does that device exist? And if you look up that device, you'll see quackery everywhere, because they're a multi-trillion-dollar propaganda machine trying to protect their allopathic petroleum-based nonsensical medical system that they created 110 years ago to create customers for life. And then eventually, because they got so many parasites in them, they wanted to wipe us all out. And that's what we've just lived through. And some of us are still here to tell the story and teach everybody else so that we don't have to go through that kind of genocidal mania again. But then you see the meningitis thing being broken out. They're trying to push the narrative. They've tried 2 or 3 times since to push this narrative because they have agents at every level of government and every level of organizations, from schools to local councils to police, all over the world. This is a huge operation to get rid of these parasitical, demonically possessed, nasty things that look like human beings, which aren't really.
Bloody hell, Mark. I am gobsmacked, absolutely gobsmacked, um, by what you've said. And again, not questioning, but like,
Mm,
wow, okay. Okay, now I want to go back to meningitis. 'Cause I don't
mm,
know much about it. And it's becoming increasingly popular and fashionable here in England.
mm.
And you said you can't catch it. So what are the basics of it?
Well, I'm not an expert in meningitis apart from the fact that I had it. But one of the things I did a video on X today, just talking about my own personal experiences with meningitis and my brother's experience. And part of that video was reading the side effects of the COVID vaccine. And there's a list as long as you wouldn't, I haven't actually counted how many side effects there are.
Yeah.
Now, Pfizer's official documentation calls it adverse effects. It's not adverse effects, it's just effects of having a poison. And there's a massive list. And that is that folded up piece of paper inside the that nobody ever reads.
Or that was blank, I heard as well during. And why it was blank is because it is, of course, very safe and effective.
It is very safe and effective, and I'm very glad to have my boosters. But, I went through that list today and I found that the meningitis was mentioned 3 times as an adverse effect of the COVID vaccine. So what they're doing is that people who have the adverse effects, they're now saying, well, you've got meningitis and now you need this meningitis jab. I mean, it's the same playbook. They've been doing it for over 100 years. I mean, the Spanish flu, right?
Mhm.
There is a theory. I'm not saying it's true. There's a theory that killed, well, the fact that we got taught in school is that the Spanish flu killed more people than the First World War did,
Mhm.
correct? 22 million people, I think it was. Well,
Something.
that coincided with a vaccine that was given to those 22 million people. It also coincided with the turning on of radar.
And I heard electrification as well.
Well, I think electrification was a bit earlier, but
Right.
radar was certainly it was the first time a man, well, first time in official history that something man-made that was a frequency-based electrical, thing changed the frequency of the planet. And as I said in the previous video, if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of frequency. That's what Tesla said. Greatest mind, him and Da Vinci. There's not many others like him. So if you understand frequency, and then that leads you to understanding what the whole plan was with 5G and 6G and everything else. Because if you create an antenna inside people, then there's that guy from the WEF. He's a really nasty bastard. I can't remember his name, and he talks about humans being hackable animals.
No, Yuval Hariri.
That's his name. I tried to forget about him because he's so evil. Like I can't. I don't want him to. I don't want to retain his face in my head. But he talked about that openly. You know, Klaus Schwab talked about the Great Reset openly. Bill Gates and all that lot did the rehearsal for COVID in 2019.
Mm.
Openly. It's right there in your face because they have to tell you because of universal law. So the demonic class understand universal law better than we do because we don't understand it at all because we never get taught it. So one of the biggest universal laws is the law of karma. Everybody thinks they know what the law of karma means, but they don't truly understand that that's what hidden in plain sight is all about. They have to tell us whether it's in TV shows like Stranger Things or if it's in movies like the one coming up called Disclosure Day by Steven Spielberg, whether it's in the newspaper articles. I mean, I often talk about the fact that 22,000 children have gone missing every single day since the Second World War. And people say that's a crazy figure, Mark. But if you type in 8 million missing children on Yandex, not Google, you'll find an article from 2014 in the Irish Mirror that says very clearly 8 million children go missing every single year, according to UNICEF or whatever. So they have to tell you. And if you divide 8 million by 365, it comes to 21,900 and something. That is official statistics.
Yeah, I've come across that.
Now, if those, and I know that official statistics are usually a massive understatement of the truth. And once you piece that together, and every time I quote it, people go, "Oh, you don't know, no, most of those children go back." No, they don't, because there's a deep underground network across the planet, and that's where they, I talked about that before. That's where they go
Yeah.
to, and they're harvested. And
Okay.
the Epstein files are the tip of the iceberg because the Epstein Island was just one of many islands. There was also Necker Island. There was Joe Biden's island just up the road from Epstein. These islands are not, they're the perfect hideaway, and a lot of that is to do with the Khazarian mafia. And the Khazaria was Ukraine, and the Khazarian mafia were satanic, and they put themselves across the world, and they were the pirates, and they were cannibals, and they did all of that stuff, and they just embedded themselves everywhere. And how did they do that? Well, they did it through secret societies. They did it by hiding behind different religions, and also in modern times. I don't know if you know Brian Garish down in Plymouth.
UK column.
Yeah, he did a lot of amazing work exposing common purpose. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
And that's how they embedded all these younger people, like, suddenly headmasters, instead of being in their 50s, were in their 30s because they were common purpose and they were placed there. And I experienced a common purpose headmistress in Manchester when my kids were taken out of class, or I think it was at lunchtime. They were made to sit in a separate room because I gave them an organic lunchbox which included a boiled egg,
Mm.
and I got called in to the school to tell me off for having a boiled egg. I was like, what are you talking about? This is healthy food. Oh no, one of our students is slightly allergic to eggs. And I said, what about all the processed eggs that are in all the packaged crap that you're feeding them in the canteen? And it was like talking to a robot, a literal robot. And she was just quoting stuff instead of engaging. She didn't have a conversation with me. That's a classic example of one of the autonomons from common purpose that have been placed strategically in every single part of social structure in preparation for the time of COVID, because that was supposed to be the end of the human race, because it was all written in the Georgia Guidestones. You know about those?
Mm. A bit. Go on.
So the Georgia Guidestones were built in 1980 by a guy called himself R.C. Christian, which was a pseudonym. I think it was $30 million. And these stones were built of granite laid out in Georgia. And it was the Satanic Ten Commandments. And the first commandment was, and it was done in multiple languages, was, and I'm paraphrasing, to keep humanity in perpetuity with nature under 500 million. Now, if you believe the official population statistics of 8 billion, that meant 7.5 billion people were going to die. They laid it out and they told us, they put it in stone because they have to tell us so that they don't suffer from the law of karma, which is a
Okay,
universal law.
okay, so then explain this universal law and the law of karma.
Well, there's a lot of universal laws, which are spiritual laws that the whole universe runs on, that have been hidden from the human race. Because if the human race knew what they were, then we would remember who we were and we would regain our power. I mean,
Okay, let me just no. There is a universal law, certainly on this planet, that believe to be true, but like the law of gravity.
that's not a universal law. That's a made-up law of physics.
A made up law. Oh God.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think gravity is what we think it
Okay,
is.
I'm trying to explain the
I can read out the
concept of
universal
law.
laws because I mean, if you just type into Google, the law of divine oneness, the law of vibration, the law of action, the law of correspondence, the law of cause and effect, the law of compensation, the law of attraction, the law of perpetual transmutation of energy, the law of relativity, the law of polarity, the law of gender, the law of rhythm. There's 12, and these are part of the Hermetic principles, and they understand these, but they've hidden them from us because if we understood them, we'd know what they were up to. And I think that's what's going on. We're in the Great Awakening, and people are becoming more aware of these things.
Okay, okay. So the universal law of karma means that they have to say what they're about to do. Explain that. Why?
No, it means that, and it's not actually in that list of the key 12 universal laws for life. I don't know why, because I've just looked at it now. But karma just means that the way it works is that they have to tell you what they're going to do next at some
Why?
point. Why? Well, I'll explain. So they have to tell you what they're going to do, and it's not their fault if you don't see it or understand it. They've told you, which means that if you don't stand up and stop them from doing that, it's your fault, not theirs. So they don't suffer the spiritual consequences of that.
Okay.
And there's a really great researcher called Ollie Damagard. Have you heard of him? Amazing
No.
guy. Um, I've had him on my show a couple of times. Ollie was the first one that really started decoding the false flags that were going on in the 2010s. And there was one in particular that there was a bomb that went off in an airport. I think it was in Germany. And Ollie was trying to dig into all the pictures and everything. And what he found was there was a image in the papers of a cafe that had been damaged by this bomb. And there was a picture of the Eiffel Tower that had gone on its side like that. And he said, there's going to be an attack on the Eiffel Tower. And then not long after, there was an attack on the Eiffel Tower, but it failed. And the reason it failed is because he'd exposed it. And what actually happened was there was I think it was I'm paraphrasing again, guys, if you're
Mhm.
watching this. It's been 10 years since I've read this information, but there was like a van full of explosives and it kind of set fire, but it didn't go off. But it was supposed to blow up the Eiffel Tower and knock it over. Because he exposed it, it failed. This is a spiritual hologram that we're in. So, that's one of the rules. And he is a great researcher and exposed that and many, many others we can stop these things once we're aware of them, which is why the word occult just means hidden. It's the same with magic. Magic is a real thing. And the only reason we don't believe it's real is because we've just been told it's not real, from birth. But they understand it. They understand it fully.
Okay. All right. So then, for example, um, if we see that there's something going on, I can kind of get this like the rollout of 15-minute cities or the
Hmm.
Greater Israel Project. That once we say it, it then makes it harder for it to happen. But that would be because can resist it then.
Well, once you see it, it loses its power. This is why all the secret stuff that goes on is secret because they're creating. There's a really good. I'll tell you where it's a good place to start to understand this. I mean, apart from going and reading the collected works of Aleister Crowley, um, or looking up the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, W.B. Yeats, and all those guys, and then going back to John Dee. I've talked about this before a lot on my channel. But if you go and look at Grant Morrison, for example, who's a Scottish comic book writer, he tells an amazing story about sigil magic. So because he's a comic book artist, he started to understand sigil magic, which is there's a technique to it where you basically you write out a phrase, you take out all the vowels and repeating letters, and what's left you turn into a magic symbol, and then you power that up either with sexual energy or with meditation, because our thoughts, our subconscious mind is incredibly powerful. He started experimenting with this, and then it got to and then things were coming true. He would write a character into his comic books, like he based a character on himself who had this gorgeous girlfriend, and then this woman turned up in his life that looked exactly like the woman in the comics. So then he started experimenting with it, and one of his characters, I think the character based on him, got ill in the comic, and then he got really ill, and then and he teaches this. He's talked about this. You can go and look him up on YouTube. So sigil magic is just one of the simplest things, and that explains the thing I was talking about in the previous episode about the power of symbols. Because if the symbols are charged, then they are literally creating reality, and that is what I believe Trump and the whole operation behind him is using on the human race in reverse to unhook us from something that's been keeping us in servitude for so long that we it's like, have you ever seen any video, have you ever read Plato's allegory of the cave?
Yeah, actually I haven't read it, but that they're looking at the shadows on the wall and they think that the shadows are real.
Yeah, and they've never known anything else. And then one of them escapes, goes outside, sees the real world, and is like, oh my God, it's gorgeous. There's birds, there's sea, there's air, it's beautiful. Runs back in to tell his former cellmates, it's amazing outside, you can't believe it. I'm going to let you all out. They kill him. And that's the world we live in. Plato had it 100% right.
Okay. Okay, now. So it got universal law. There was
Yeah,
something
write that down and go and look them up and then learn them, because once you understand, I mean, I'm not an expert in them. I know people who are. So I'm a little bit lazy. I have people I can ring up and, help me out.
No, not as lazy as me. I got you.
Well, well, you're in trouble.
Uh-oh.
I
All
mean,
right.
it's important for me. I was thinking about this earlier today. I'm kind of a broad stroke picture man. I'm
Yes.
not a statistics. I'm not a spread. I hate spreadsheets. And I learned to distrust facts a long time ago. So it's like a mixture of intuition. And what I love about this whole Great Awakening is it's just made my intuition stronger. And I remember standing up when I was on tour in America in 22, asking the audience, which was always a crowd of like awake people in 17 different cities, and I said, has anybody noticed that they're getting more psychic? And literally 90% of them would be like, yay! And this is what's happening. Our DNA is being activated. Again, I was talking to my son in the kitchen. I said, they teach you in school that 97% of human DNA is junk DNA,
Mm,
don't they?
yeah.
Well, it's not junk, it's just deactivated. And what's happening at the moment is our DNA is being activated, because your DNA is an area, it's an aerial. It picks up information, and the information's coming through all around us, especially from the sun. And that's why Bill Gates wants to block the sun. That's why the chemtrailing, today was a beautiful blue sky in the morning in Ireland, and I counted at least 50 planes chemtrailing, and then it was a haze by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And you're like, what's going on there? Because we're receiving codes from the sun that's upgrading our DNA, and they're trying to stop it, because that's what the Q post, nothing can stop what is coming, is all about. Because
Right.
this ascension is coming. And, I could give you loads of theories about what that looks like, but I don't honestly know. I've
Mm.
got a lot of ideas of what it could be. But I've been trying to work this out all my life, and the opinions
Okay.
I share are just
So
based on
just
that.
on that, these energies from outer space, these energies coming in from the sun,
Didn't
because
say it
the
was outer space. I said it was from the sun, which
okay,
may well be within the dome.
okay, but then I'm gonna add something to that, right?
Mm.
So there's from the sun, and there's all sorts of changes going on with the sun. Uh, there's a guy Malcolm Bradbury on X that I follow him, and he's been posting stuff about these big coronal holes that have shown up. And then there's Stefan Burns who does a lot of stuff about what's happening uh, in outer space. Then there's the Schumann resonance,
Hmm.
changes in the Schumann resonance.
Which is off the charts today and has been for months.
Yeah, yes, yeah, completely, and altering the energetic footprint of the Earth, as well as the energetic input, is going to have an impact on us
Of course.
because ultimately we are energy.
Well,
And
look
then
at the
there's
effect
the
the moon has on women.
yes,
You know, it's the moonstrawl cycle.
but on human beings because I think on a full moon crime goes up.
No, absolutely. I mean, do you remember when Prince was interviewed in the 90s on a chat show and he said they were chemtrailing over areas where black people had been pushed into ghettos, and as soon as the chemtrails came out, violence went through the roof. You
Right.
know, weather manipulation's been around for a very, very long time. There was the RAF drowned a village in Cornwall or Devon, 100 years ago, getting it wrong. It's seeding the clouds, and they literally caused the flood that killed loads of people. I think that thing in, the Aberfan thing was probably connected to that. That's just a theory. Don't start leaving comments. It's just a little theory that popped into my head, which was the slag heap that killed all the school children years ago. Um, you know, none of this is new.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Now you mentioned earlier about killing demonic entities and being a Muslim, I think of jinn,
Yeah, well,
right?
just same thing. Same thing. Every
Yeah.
Muslim knows about jinn,
Yeah.
but Christians don't believe in demonic entities because it's been, battered out of them. And the ones that are left have been battered out of Christianity. Like, um, consider Ireland, right? Now,
Mhm.
Ireland was a very staunchly Catholic country for many, many years, right? The Catholicism had a iron grip on this country, and paedophilia was rife in this country, and that's part of the. I'm publishing a book about satanic ritual abuse in Ireland very soon, which talks about this from a very personal point of view of a girl that got brought up in a family that was part of a satanic coven in Ireland in the 60s, right? And this has never gone away; it's still here. And what happened in around 2010, 2012 was there was a big furore in Ireland because there was a lot of paedophile priests being exposed, and the Catholic Church, instead of punishing them, scattered them around the world. And a lot of people in Ireland turned their back on the Catholic Church because of this. But at the same time, they turned their back on God. So you've had a lot of people here that have been spiritually at sea. And I think it's all deliberately designed that way in order to do what they've done to Ireland in the last 10 years, as an example,
Mm.
because they are social engineers par excellence and they have a very long term plan because they live a lot longer than a human life, you know?
But
There's,
also just on the long-term plan, I had this great conversation with Ian Burlingame when he first came on my channel. It was on my older channel, and he was saying how the uber elites think long term because they've
yeah.
got so much power and control and wealth that they want their legacy to survive. You and I, with what we got in our houses and our books or collection of books or whatever, right? Or Lego. Not that I have a collection of Lego, right? It's not a lot to
I
pass
wouldn't
on
mind. Yeah. Legos.
that I
Yeah.
necessarily want to pass on. But if what I've got is lots of estates that were handed down from generation of generation, then there's a conversation that grows throughout my family that we got to take care of this and preserve this so then we think long term in a way that ordinary folk, normal folk, common folk don't do.
Yeah, well, we get raped. You get inheritance tax, property tax. You get taxed to death. So it's very hard without understanding private trusts, for example. which is one of the ways they do it. They have private trust. The other thing the rich do that the rest of us don't do is that they borrow money based upon their assets, and they never sell their assets. And you can't be taxed on borrowed money. And if the asset's appreciating, it's all free money to them. So they
Mm,
have a completely different outlook that is kept within their circles and nowhere else, because the rest of us are just goyim or plebs or whatever the hell they call us. And we have this sort of, it's a bit like a friend of mine wrote a book called Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis by a guy called Danny Carroll. And Danny wrote that book based upon his knowledge of German New Medicine, which is all about the power of the subconscious mind to be able to heal the body. And why I find that very interesting is because in the Bible it says that man should live for 70 years, which is 70 years. So it's programmed into us. It's like, if because I've got a healing center, I meet a lot of people that say they've had a terminal diagnosis, and the first thing I say is stop saying that, because it's not, who says it's terminal.
mm.
Because what happens, and a lot of people watching this will relate to this because they're like me, they probably lost relatives to exactly this thing, which is when a doctor says there's nothing we can do, I'm afraid it's terminal. How long have I got? Oh, about 3 months. 3 months later, dead. Because the mind is so powerful, if it believes it, it's going to switch off in 3 months.
Mm.
So they've embedded it into the literature, the media, and everything else. We are supposed to live for 800 years. If you look at the Bible, and I'm only quoting this because a lot of people will have noticed it. You've got kings that reigned for 22,000 years. How's that possible? Oh, it's just an allegory. No, I don't think it is. I think it's actually true. We have. That's why I was talking about the Stargate in Iran. That apparently that's got the immortality codes that have been locked off from humanity. Combine that with 97% DNA locked off. Combine that with our lack of knowledge of universal law. We are basically in the dark. And I'm not saying any of what I've just said is true. I'm saying this stuff for people to maybe be interested enough to go and do the research themselves and make their own minds up. Because, I mean, you can't force anybody to believe any ideas.
Sure.
They have to come to it themselves. And I don't present myself as an oracle. I just like, this stuff is too interesting. It's too interesting to ignore.
Well, just on that, there's what's happening in the world, in the universe. There's stuff happening, and
Mm,
then there's different ways of analyzing or interpreting those events. So, for example, how you're talking and behaving now with everything, right? I could look through a psychological analysis through that
yeah,
filter to
yeah,
explain what you're doing. Or I could look at it through, I don't know, a socioeconomic, a Marxist
yeah.
filter, or, you know, all sorts of different filters to try and explain. And then what you're proposing or you're presenting is an alternate filter, one that isn't, I suppose, very commonplace or conventional,
No.
but will give us access to different ideas, different experiences, different forms of knowledge, which could turn out to be way more useful than what's the filters that are already available to us.
Well, everything that I talk to you about is based upon my own life experiences, and I've had a lot of very deeply spiritual experiences that have led me to the point where I come out of this stuff without
Yeah.
fear of ridicule, right? And I think this whole we are in a spiritual war. People need to grasp that idea, and everything we're seeing in the 3D is a part of what is necessary for us to evolve spiritually.
Okay.
That's my understanding, and I've been called upon to share that. The reason my podcast is called Adventures in a Cosmic Suit is because I'm the one learning this and then sharing it as an imperfect human being along with my audience.
Mm.
I don't ever sit there and We're past gurus. We're past all of that. I mean, look at all the gurus that have just been dismantled by the Epstein files, the Dalai Lama, Deepak Chopra, Oprah Winfrey. These were the spiritual leaders in the West for decades.
Yeah.
But turns out they're not so good, are they?
No, no. And I do agree with you about spiritual war. It is a war against good and evil. It is against a war against genocidal pedophiles
Yeah,
who are out to kill millions and millions of people. It
Yeah.
is one that I think we are winning because their plans are going awry.
Hmm.
I want to go back to Stargates because, dare I ask this question, Mark?
I don't
What
know.
what is a Stargate? Is it like a portal into another dimension? Or
Yeah.
oh, of
It's
course.
it's how you get around the universe. I mean, the film Stargate and the TV series Stargate, go and watch it. It's all true. You know, they hide it in plain sight. And I think they're remaking Stargate actually because this stuff has to come up again. It's you know what happens in the entertainment world, especially at the highest levels, is very esoteric. You know, it's like predictive programming on one hand, but it's also there's also a lot of interesting things going on. Like I mentioned, Disclosure Day, Steven Spielberg. Personally, I think Steven Spielberg's been long gone. This film's going to be very interesting because it looks like from the trailers. I did a video about one of the second trailer that came out last week, where you can see a man standing in a wheat field and a crop circle forms around him. And my interpretation of that is that he is part of the Sphere Network. Now, the Sphere Network is there's a book written by a guy called Patrick Jackson from Cambridge who has empirically come to the conclusion, not like me, broad strokes, intuitive. He's done it empirically with like reverse engineering it. He's an IT specialist. And that book is well worth reading. Anybody watching this, I'm going to be interviewing him soon. And he started looking into the paranormal and went to the most haunted houses in the UK and you know had these experiences, but he was analyzing it instead of being frightened by it, because what happens with the whole UFO subject or the paranormal subject is people use their confirmation bias to lock themselves into what becomes another cult. And this is why, you know, the age of cult leaders has to end. You know, nobody's above anybody else. We don't, you are the leader that you're looking for. You're the savior that you're looking for. Don't stop looking outside ourselves because it's all inside us. And Patrick wrote this book called The Sphere Network, which connects to the Booger sphere. Have you seen that? The silver sphere that fell in, I think it was in, I can't remember where it was. It's South America anyway. And it's like this sphere that was levitating and it's covered in, they don't know what the technology is. It can fly, it can glow, which is where ball lightning comes from, and it's covered in ancient symbolism, right? And this thing's old. And Patrick's thesis is that, and I agree with it, is that there's all the non-human intelligence that we think is out there is actually already here. It's been on this planet for millions of years before us. And there's a network of these spheres that create crop circles, that form triangular lights in the sky that move around, that is like protecting this planet and protecting us. And we're part of that network. And this is what I think the real disclosure is going to be. It's not necessarily about spacemen in little green men. It's like they're already among us, and it's already here, and it's underground. You know, I mentioned Gilgamesh in our last video in relation to Iraq and you know stargates over there. They all of the giants are real. You know, they're real. They're 100% real, and they're still giants here. And if you look into the Elohim and you look into the Book of Enoch, for example, which got taken out of the Bible, that book talks about the Nephilim, which were the fallen angels coming down to earth and making love to human women and creating these giants that became such horrific cannibals. They had to be wiped. God decided to wipe them out with a flood. Whether all of that is true or not exactly, the thing is there's something to it. And why do we have all these myths about fairies and leprechauns and giants and dragons? You know, that is not made up stuff. It's real. I've seen a dragon made of light just over there with a witness 3 years ago, flew right over our heads silently. And when you see stuff like that, you can just go, oh, I'm not going to tell anybody because they might call me names and say I'm an idiot. You can share it. And when I've shared this stuff on my own channel, I've had thousands of people from around the world say, well, I've seen that as well, and I've seen that, and I've never dared tell anybody because nobody's ever given me permission to speak about it.
This is mind-boggling stuff. So, anybody's watching, if you've seen a dragon, let us know in the comments.
Oh,
And
there's a
don't
lot of people that have seen dragons.
fake it. Don't claim to see a dragon if you haven't. We'll be able to tell,
It's
and
all
it
in
will
this
be
book.
bad
I'm
karma.
going to send you my book.
Weapons of mass protection. Practical Tools for Spiritual Warfare.
Yeah,
Okay. Forward by
you know it.
Janine.
Janine, yeah.
Is that Tarot by Janine? Janine.
Yeah. Do you know
Okay.
her?
No, I've listened to loads of her stuff. I don't know her.
No, she's a good mate of mine. She's been over to Ireland twice and we toured America together. She's great.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Okay. Why the Stargates in Iran and there's one in Iraq? Why does
Allegedly.
Trump need to, allegedly, why does Trump need to get to it? What's wrong with the Iranians having it? What's so special about Trump versus the Iranians?
Well, you've got to stop thinking about it as Iranians and Trump. So Trump is a representative of an alliance, right? What that alliance contains, I'm not going to tell you as a fact, but I believe it's like it's intergalactic, it's ancient, right? He represents something ancient. And the Iranians, instead of saying Iranians, it's like saying British. It's just like it's too loose a term. There are demons inhabiting human bodies that have created bases basically on the planet in order to carry out a plan. Ultimately, I mean, we could go on. In a half-hour show, I couldn't really cover this, but ultimately, they are there for us because, on a spiritual level, if it wasn't for the jinn demons, tripping us up and making us do stupid things and trying to kill us, we wouldn't evolve. So, effectively, they are helping us evolve. But on a on another level, they've had control over this, and we are being liberated, and that involves taking them out. And it's not Iranians that have been taken out, it's demonically controlled humans or demonically possessed humans. And that doesn't mean all Iranians are demonically possessed, it means the ones that are doing this. It's like Congress is and the Houses of Parliament are mainly full of demonically possessed people. I mean, look at what the House of Lords passed last night.
Ah, for
Abortion,
people,
full
for
term abortion.
yeah, for people
Hello.
who don't know, full-term abortion, infanticide, that a woman can, for any reason whatsoever, terminate a full-term fetus. That is just evil, evil,
It
evil,
is evil,
evil.
totally evil. Yet you say that, and then there'll be, you don't believe in women's rights. I do actually believe in women's rights. But if you go and look up, have you ever seen the Aaron Russo interview that Alex Jones did in the 2000s? So Aaron Russo is one of the best interviews. Everybody should watch this interview. He was a guy from New York, I think, or Chicago. I can't remember exactly, but he became Bette Midler's manager. She got really successful. He ended up being a film producer. He's the guy who produced Trading Places, the Eddie Murphy film in the 80s that made millions. And
Hmm.
then he became friends with one of Nick Rockefeller. And Nick Rockefeller tried to get him to join the club, and he told Aaron in the 80s, he said, this is what's going to happen. Digital ID, we're going to bring in vaccines, we're going to kill most of them, and then we'll all be rich and blah, blah, blah. And Nick was like, not Nick, Aaron was like, what? I don't want to be part of that. So he started making activist films. He did this amazing interview with Alex Jones. Whatever you think to Alex Jones, everybody should watch it because that is a genuine man. And he got killed. They got rid of him. But he was telling everybody this 25 years ago. It's not
Wow.
new. None of this information's new. And there's a lot of amazing people out there like David Icke who's been teaching people tons of this stuff. But then there's divergences within the conspiracy world where, one person's married to the idea that Trump's part of the bad guys, another one says Q's a good thing, another one says Q's part of the PSYOP, which is exactly the same as they used in Russia 100 years ago to round up all the dissidents. You've got all these different theories going around, but ultimately all of them are there to serve us and our soul's development on a spiritual level.
Okay. Okay. I'll look up the Aaron Russo, Alex Jones interview. If anybody's watching, hopefully people are watching. Let us know in the comments if you've seen that interview and what you learned from it. Um, so David Icke,
Hmm.
he says that he's of the point of view that Trump is a baddie,
Yeah,
one of the, I don't know, the demonically possessed or whatever.
yeah.
But you say that he's a goody. Why the divergence?
I
And
don't know.
could
I've
okay, here's
made.
something crazy, right? Is
Mm,
could David Icke be controlled opposition or something, right?
don't know. I might be controlled opposition and not know it. I mean, I don't know. All I know is my truth, and it's not like an ego thing. It's just like I sit and feel it, and I do the dowsing rods, and I do everything. I've got loads of spiritual. I've got a spiritual team that There's a lot of people out there that know intuitively what's right and what's wrong. I have no idea about David's opinion about Trump, apart from I just have no idea. I mean, I know I've met him twice. I've met Gareth. I put Gareth on stage at Manchester Monastery. I've been to film them in the iconic. I love the Ikes. I owe them a lot.
Mm,
I
absolutely.
I respect them hugely.
Absolutely.
And David Icke's been one of my heroes for 30 years.
Well, I
But
remember going to the lockdown demos, the anti-lockdown demos in London, and he was there. Every single one that I was at, he was there.
I don't
Great to
know
see him.
why. I made a video about this a few months ago. I said I just don't understand why. And the thing is, though, I've always said on my podcast that I'm not married to any of these ideas 100%. It's like they're all possibilities, and everything's in flux as well. So we are. One thing David Icke says that is perfect is we're in a post-fact society, right? And he also explains the totalitarian tiptoe to perfection. And he gave us loads of information. Is it possible that he's controlled opposition? Yes, of course it is, but that's a very long-term plan, which would make sense. I personally not sure that that's the case. I think maybe it's more a case of he's had to put up with so much shit over so long, and looking into this darkness for so long could make you just not trust anybody.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and I and
absolutely.
I totally understand that. But my viewpoint has been this very simply. I've been aware of the darkness, the satanic ritual abuse for decades, and
Mm,
it's not an easy thing to live with. But I feel the creator, whatever you want to call him, in my heart, and I have a direct line to that as far as I know, and I trust that. And the way that I understand the universe is that it always wants to achieve a state of homeostasis. Well, in the body, it's homeostasis, but a balance.
mm.
It's that. So if there is this much evil, there has to be an opposing force of good. And if that opposing force of good has got any chance of removing the evil, it'll have to be hidden. That's my view.
Yeah. And then something just occurred to me about David Icke being controlled opposition. And I don't, I've met him a couple of times. I think he's made a profound difference to millions and millions of people and woken up. And I don't mean in any way to disrespect you. I'm just throwing out an idea. But
Mm,
the idea could be based upon like this whole notion of controlled opposition as a reaction to how much we've been lied to.
mm.
So these people, these globalists, these oligarchs, these politicians, they lied to me, they lied to me, they lied to me, they betrayed me. Then there are this other group of people, truth tellers. Well, how do I know they are lying to me? They could be lying to me, because I've been
Yeah.
betrayed once. And these other new leaders or people putting their heads upon the parapet, well, they're probably liars as well.
Yeah, well, there's a guy out on Twitter and Facebook in the last few days saying that I'm controlled opposition. This happens.
It's so
It happens
easy.
everywhere. It doesn't matter.
So
All,
easy.
all I know is I write poems. I try to make people laugh. I have a lot of information that's interesting. I'm healing people with a healing center. I'm doing my best.
Yeah. But it's just so easy to say, to just say, oh, controlled opposition. Oh, far right white supremacists. Oh, anti-vaxxer. Oh, anti-Semite. Anything and everything. Oh, transphobe, in order to smear people, diminish them, and not actually look at the content of what they're saying.
Well, I've just been called a CUNT on Twitter about 5 times in the last hour because of what I've just said about meningitis. And it's the same nonsense. It's all demonic energy. They are pissed off that they're about to lose their food source because we're their food source. And if you go and look into the work of Dr. Jerry Marzinski, did I mention him on the previous show? I can't remember. He's an American psychotherapist who I've had the pleasure of interviewing 2 or 3 times. He came to the same conclusions as me about what controls the world in a very different route because he was brought up by a schizophrenic dad. He became an expert in schizophrenia. He became the doctor that went to take care of the really bad schizophrenics in American prisons that chop up their girlfriends, those kind of crazy guys. And he noticed 20, 30 years ago that all these guys had something in common and they were unconnected. And that was that they were talking to an invisible friend as a child. That invisible friend was a jinn, right? Or a demon, as we may call them in England, right? And then he realized, he worked out over the years from communicating with these demons, that they have a hierarchical structure. So they have, the same hierarchical structure we have, the pyramidical structure. So they have a low level demon will come for you as a child, as they came for me, as I talk about in chapter one of this book. And then they will try to, you know, they want to control you and they want you to do crazy things and they want your loosh, which David Icke talks about extensively. And then they pass you up the chain, and because there's a kind of commission that passes up the chain, because there is politics in the other dimensions, there is commerce in the other dimensions, and their unit of exchange is loosh.
Mm.
Loosh is like the energy that comes off you when you're in fear and etc., guilt and shame and all that stuff. Low frequency. They love the low frequency. It's like their fuel for their battery. They get that loosh off you when you're a child, and they follow you and stay with you all the way through your life, unless they pass you up the chain to higher and more powerful demons. But ultimately, it all goes to the top. So the one at the top is getting super looshed, and that's a real structure. And he wrote a book about it, and I interviewed him because I came to the same conclusions as him in my own life, but not by being a psychotherapist.
That's absolutely, absolutely
And
incredible.
I just remembered this. He got told by his superiors within the psychotherapy world, and he was very high up. He still is, actually. He got told when he went to them and he said, look, all these guys, they're all having this conversation with an invisible person, and it's the same conversation, and they're not connected. And he got told by his superiors within that profession, don't go there. You're encouraging their hallucinations. Give them these pills instead. And it takes pioneers like Jerry Marzinski for people like me to be able to speak with not authority, but with more authority than I had when it was just me on my own with my own theories. Because
Mm.
this is a learned man, a learned gentleman of great scholarly achievement, with tons and tons of evidence that he put into a book, and people come at this from different directions. And the reason I speak about this stuff publicly is because I've seen the the strength it gives people that have hidden this stuff away. I told you about those victims of paedophilia that 50 years they'd never told anybody because they were so ashamed of it, and then
Yeah.
when they came out of it, it was just incredibly liberating for them. And it's incredibly, the whole world has been abused, the whole world has been demonically possessed, and we're coming out of it and we're being liberated, but we're doing it because we are the creators of this reality.
Well, one of the ways that we're doing it is through having these conversations
Mm.
publicly and then people listening in and learning from that. I know, people like David Icke and David Curtin, who's the leader of the Heritage Party, and I'd seen them on lockdown, on the anti-lockdown demos.
Great
And,
guy.
and also yourself, Mark, and many, many others who during that whole period, that whole lockdown episode, put their heads above the parapet sometimes at great, personal, financial, or
Oh,
reputational
I
risk.
thought I was going to be killed.
Right.
I knew that the plan was that there would be dots on the front door and we'd be rounded up at some point. And I had to make that decision. I remember sitting in this room going, okay, am I willing to die for this or not? And the conclusion was, I have to do this, even if they kill me, because my kids have to know that I stood up.
Yeah. But also for them to have a decent life,
Well,
right?
that's the
It's what we
thing. I
want to
didn't
pass
want
on.
my kids were not going to grow up in the New World Order. Just not
Yeah.
going to happen. And I'd
Yeah.
rather die trying to stop it than sit on my ass doing nothing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, so then talking to people is really, really important. What else can we do to protect ourselves from the jinn?
Well, that's what this book's all about.
Weapons of mass protection, of
This is
course.
all about spiritual protection.
Okay.
There's a huge amount you can do because we have all the power. The one weapon they have is fear. That's why demons always look scary, because fear is the thing that keeps us in a low vibrational state. And you've seen from COVID that the best way to control them, it's a blind man and a galloping horse can see. Once you introduce fear, people just lose all rationality and they're so easy to control. That is their number one weapon. I mean, look at all the people going to buy toilet roll during 2020 for fuck's sake. I mean, it's
No,
insane.
no, I absolutely, absolutely get it. It's the whole thing about people wearing masks and having the injections and then getting angry with those that didn't wear masks or didn't have the injections. But wait a minute, you're protected.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
The logic goes out the window when you're in a
yeah,
state of fear.
absolutely. Or you wear a mask when you stand up in a restaurant, but not when you sit down.
I
Because
got thrown out of so many places because I refused to do it. And then I remember standing up in a restaurant not far from here, and there were Eastern Europeans working in the restaurant, and I was like, "Your grandparents fought against communism. You should be fucking ashamed of yourselves." And I've never been allowed back in that restaurant, but it's so shameful for those people, but they were in a state of fear, and I have compassion for them. And the ones that got conned into being jabbed and stuff, I have compassion for them too, because and we can do something about that. And I've been trying to go on about that for ages, but as soon as you stand up and say, okay, if you got jabbed, this is what you need. You need curcumin, you need augmented NAC, you need bromelain, you need I can't remember the other
vitamin D.
nattokinase. Those four will clear most of you out. Then you've got to start attacking the parasites with natural things. You can use ivermectin, but you can use wormwood, you clove tea before bed. Swallow a frozen castor oil capsule at 11 o'clock at night, and 3 a.m. it will defrost and kill those parasites in the opening of your liver at 3 a.m. in the morning. I mean, it's crazy information like this, but simple stuff. And we've reversed terminal diagnosis from people here at our healing center just with simple knowledge like that, structured, clean, living water with electrolytes. This is the stuff. It's so simple. Nobody's sick, they're toxic. So we have been toxified so badly that we believe that these labels they call diseases are real. They're not. It's just dis-ease caused by overtoxification, which they've given a name to because the body is showing symptoms of overtoxification in a certain part of the body. So they call it this cancer, that, da, 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 da. But ultimately, it comes down to a very simple thing. Every cell in your body is a battery. If the battery's not charged enough, you're going to die. So you've got to
Yeah,
keep charging the battery. It's really simple. You've got to ground on the earth. I mean, our shoes are weapons against us. We are not discharging positive ions and bringing in the negative ions from the earth. That's what we're supposed to do. You can go and touch a tree, hug a tree, which they all take the piss out of. You're a hippie. You hug a tree, you're going to get full of negative ions, which
yeah,
is going to make you incredibly strong. It's simple. So eggs, they demonized eggs. Do you remember Edwina Curry with the salmonella? Everybody shit themselves about eggs, you
yeah.
know. But in the 60s, they used to say go to work on an egg.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
You should eat 10 eggs a day.
I just on the barefoot stuff, there a few years ago on holiday in Cornwall, we were staying in a villa on this cliffside, and it was a dirt path down to the beach
I love Cornwall.
and so sand. And so I spent most of the time just walking on earth and
Yeah,
sand, and I went barefoot for the
yeah.
whole week I was there, pretty much, right? I, at night, I'm lying in bed. My legs are so alive. It
Yeah.
was wonderful.
And I bet you had a
Absolutely
massive
wonderful.
boner in the morning. No, it's true.
My son's going to be editing this video.
Sorry,
We're going to move on from that.
that's my
Right?
sense. That's my sense of humor.
Mark, what you're talking about, um, one, it's really, really important for us to clean our minds and our heads of all the rubbish that they've put in,
Hmm.
right? Through TV and the media and government policy and schooling, right? Which is why what you offer through your channel and your books is so useful. Then we have to clean ourselves spiritually, clean ourselves nutritionally, clean ourselves energetically. which is why I recommend people should go check out Mark's work, go check out Mark's website, go follow Mark on X. And Mark, I really, really appreciate and thank you for having this wild, wild conversation.
Well, just it's not about being perfect. This is so important. People beat themselves up,
Yeah,
flagellate themselves, and you don't need to do that. You just need to understand the fundamental principles. Get good with your creator because what we're about to go through is going to test every one of us.
yeah. Get good with your creator.
However you see that.
However you see your creator. Absolutely, absolutely. Mark, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for you having this conversation. Everybody, please tell us what is it you appreciate about this particular conversation? What piqued your thinking? What did you find provocative? Because this is a very, very different kind of conversation to the ones that I would have with Tom Luongo or Susan Kokinder, right? So
But
thank you,
everything
thank
we've
you.
talked about informs all the politics.
Yes,
That's why
absolutely.
it's behind this. Anyway, thank you, Rich.
Thank
God
you,
bless.
thank you, thank you. This is Rich and Sean signing out. All the best. Bye bye.
Bye.